The commission, however, could not ignore the fact that one shot had missed, and instead chose to ignore the evidence of the Zapruder film. In an attempt to maintain their single-bullet theory, the commission claimed that Governor Connally had simply suffered a delayed reaction to his wounds. Dr. Robert Shaw was the attending surgeon at Parkland Hospital who operated on the governor.
I would disagree, because I don't think that there would be a delayed action to a wound that was as massive as the wound he received of his chest. And I'm also influenced by what Nellie Connally said. She said that her husband was struck and reared up like a wounded animal before she heard the bullet. I mean, heard the shot that had been fired. So this would indicate that his reaction was almost immediate.
Let me emphasize that there is no conceivable way that a person who is not under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or who is not involved in a kind of a military situation where you have tremendous stress taking over and all kinds of things happening to your endocrine system, there's no way for an individual to sustain 3 holes into, well, actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes into and out of the chest, into and out of the wrist, and into the left thigh, and to have major structures damaged in the fashion that I referred to before and still remain alert. There simply is no way that his face could appear so tranquil as is demonstrated in 230, with not the slightest suggestion of any kind of pain, nothing that has been evoked by all of these bullet wounds, and there's no way that that right wrist could have continued to clutch the large Texas Stetson hat after the nerve had been severed.
In their attempt to somehow explain the governor's reactions, the commission ignored perhaps the most important witness to the events.
But unquestionably, when the first shot was fired, I recognized it as a shot. I thought of nothing else but that it was a rifle shot. I turned to my right. I had time to think. I had time to react. And I turned to my right to look back over my right shoulder to see if I could see anything unusual, and particularly to see if I could catch him out of the corner of my eye. Because I immediately thought...
Him, you mean
the president.
The president.
Because I immediately thought of an assassination attempt the moment I heard the shot. I didn't see anything except just the general blur of waving of people moving, but nothing really unusual. I did not see the president out of the corner of my eye, and I was in the process of turning back to look over my left shoulder, and had about come to the point where I was looking straight forward again when I felt the impact of the bullet that hit me. I am convinced beyond any question of a doubt that the first shot that was fired did not hit me. Then I was hit.
Despite the insistent testimony of Governor Connally that he was hit by a different shot, the commission clung to their 1-bullet, 2-victim scenario. The critics, however, raised other arguments.
One of the major difficulties the Warren Commission had with the implementation of the single bullet theory as sort of a magic solution to the problems of evidence that they were faced with was the fact that Governor Connally and President Kennedy were not properly aligned for the single bullet to inflict all the non-fatal wounds.
When you study any frame of the Zapruder film prior to the shooting, you will see that Connally was seated essentially directly in front of Kennedy. There is simply no way for a bullet to have emerged from the midline of Kennedy's neck anteriorly, moving downward and to the left to get over to Governor Connally's right posterior axillary area, which means just behind the right armpit.
You know, if they could guide missiles like that bullet would have had they been guided, it would be considered to be one of the wonders of the world today. Do you have any idea how many different directions it had to go to? It never had the same angle. It never had the same direction.
It is an absolute impossibility. Here again, when you say to these people, as I have on numerous occasions, orally in testimony, in my articles, as a member of the Forensic Pathology Panel of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, to my colleagues, how do you account for this? they just look at you and say, well, you don't really know what their positions were. They also say that doesn't the Stemmons Freeway sign block our view of them, and we don't know what happened. But then they ignore that which they know, but which they must set aside, and that is that the period of time that elapses behind the Stemmons Freeway sign is 0.9 seconds, or 9/10 of 1 second. So in other words, what they would have you believe is that in less than 1 second, Connally, by some kind of prearranged, meditated move, went to his left, got shot, and came back to his right, and once again resumed the position directly in front of the president. It's nonsense. It is worse than being disingenuous. It is worse than trying simply to bend over, to be fair-minded and objective. It is, on the part of the investigators who know better, a blatant lie designed to mislead.
At the center of this trajectory problem was the conclusion that a bullet had traveled through the president's neck, exiting in the front of his throat. The commission stated that this finding was reached during the autopsy performed on the president's body at the Bethesda Naval Hospital on the night of the assassination. The results of the autopsy were crucial to the single bullet theory. For there to be even the possibility that both men were hit by the same shot, the bullet which hit the president in the back must have exited from the front of his throat, allowing it to then hit Governor Connally. This autopsy finding, however, was challenged on several key points. Many critics argued that while the commission said the bullet had exited from the front of the throat, the doctors who operated on the president in Dallas disagreed. They said that the wound that they saw in the throat was not an exit wound, but an entrance wound.
Well, Dallas is a large city, and there are many gunshot wounds that come into Parkland Memorial Hospital on a regular basis. This is a normal sort of life for a hospital in a big city, and especially Texas, where a lot of people carry guns. And when they looked at President Kennedy and his throat, they immediately concurred that he had been hit by a shot fired from the front.
The Parkland Hospital doctors held a press conference a few moments after the president was officially pronounced dead. At 2 points, Dr. Malcolm Perry said that when in response to questions he was asked, he said specifically that the wound in the front of the president's neck was a wound of entrance. And each time his superior, Dr. Champ Clark, confirmed what Dr. Perry said. Now, the simplest way and the easiest way to make a pretty definitive determination is the size of the bullet hole. It almost invariably is true that on entering, the bullet makes the smaller hole. It makes a much larger hole in exiting. The size of the hole measured by Dr. Perry at the hospital was 3 by 5 millimeters. That's quite small. That's actually smaller than the size of the bullet, the diameter of the bullet itself. The hole in the president's back, according to the measurement made later at the Bethesda Naval Hospital, was almost twice that size. And on this basis alone, you would never expect the wound in the front of the president's neck to be a wound of exit.
The Parkland doctor's observation of an entrance wound in the front of the president's neck not only destroyed the single bullet theory, it also placed a gunman in front of the limousine, most likely on this grassy knoll where in fact many witnesses and police believed that the shots came from. But when the Dallas doctors later testified about the wound before the Warren Commission, they had a mysterious change of opinion.